Okay, so thank you guys for joining me on our PLC today. Even though we are back in person for school, we still PLC on our asynchronous days, so that's why we are meeting over a Google Meet. So thank you guys for joining us. Even though I've already sent out a copy of the agenda, we'll just review it to make sure everybody knows what's going to be going on today. So the first thing to assign roles, so I'll be the facilitator and presenter. Bailey, if you could kind of keep us on track of time, we should be no longer than 10-15 minutes. And then Shelby, if you could take notes for important things for those of us that weren't able to attend this virtual meeting today. We're going to discuss our vision statement as a PLC. I have a reflection question to get us started, and then we'll dive into the actual project. And then to wrap up, I'll take any questions or suggestions as we prepare for the following week's PLC. All right, so this is my personal vision statement as a teacher leader in a professional community. So I want to create an engaging and dedicated environment where professionals come in each day with a growth mindset while providing and accepting constructive and respectful feedback from each other. I will work to break down barriers from our students as well as our professionals to create strong and caring learning environments for our students as well as ourselves. I will work towards this goal by extending and promoting my ideas, providing useful resources, and offering myself as a classroom support if needed. All right, so to get us thinking, I just kind of want you guys to think about what are you currently using to check and assess for reading comprehension within your students. This is kind of a bigger deal for me. I've noticed since we've come back from virtual learning, my kids seem to struggle with simple reading comprehension questions. So think about how this could be applied to your classrooms as well as we move through the project. All right, so the current problem is that after finally returning to in-person learning, I've noticed several students struggle to answer simple comprehension questions. So things we normally would breeze through is kind of taking us a little bit longer. I believe these skills have dropped significantly during the course of their year-long virtual learning experiences, which I'm sure you guys have probably noticed as well in your classrooms. So I want to work to improve their comprehension skills and bring all students closer to reading on their grade level. So now that we're actually back in the classroom, we can kind of get a stronger handle on what needs to be worked on. And for me, it's definitely their comprehension skills. So students will improve their reading comprehension skills by participating in engaging lessons and activities, and also by completing weekly comprehension checks that will assess their progress. So here's how I'm going to implement that. So during the beginning stages of this project, I will begin implementing the Rooted in Reading lesson plans that include weekly comprehension checks. So Rooted in Reading are fully prepared lesson plans that we can implement in our classrooms that go over certain reading skills each week. They have their main reading skill, they have comprehension activities, and then we also have some vocabulary and grammar to also help increase that comprehension in reading. So along with the reading strategy students will be practicing that week, students will complete activities that will increase their comprehension skills. I would also be more intentional about their activities that we complete together, as well as ask them higher order thinking questions during lessons and during their read to self time. I know during some downtime, whenever there's an awkward couple of minutes, what I normally like to do is grab a book and read aloud to them. So by implementing higher order thinking questions during these read alouds, that would increase their comprehension skills throughout the rest of the day. So this is one of the first resources that I found that would help us improve their comprehension reading skills. So not only would we be using the Rooted in Reading lesson plans, but I also found a quick little article that just mentions 10 ways to improve reading comprehension skills in your classroom. So one thing that is important is just to always discuss reading comprehension. So by practicing what we preach, by giving them and modeling those higher order thinking questions and answering them ourselves, it allows for the students to see what their goals are, what they can achieve on their own after we work on whole group comprehension practice. So discussing each assignment, discussing each book that they read, whether they're reading independently in a group or whole group, discussing and asking them those questions will improve their reading comprehension when they are working independently. I know what we can also do is to urge your thinking before reading. So students should read questions or think about their own questions before they begin even reading their stories. It is important to teach goal setting. So along with these comprehension checks and things that they'll be doing as their activities, have them set a goal for the scores that they want to reach or attain on their weekly checks. And the most important thing is just to kind of urge them to think about their reading, making sure they know and understand what they're reading, and being able to kind of retell and work with their classmates to improve those comprehension skills. So after our meeting, we can print out this article and we can kind of chat more about it to help how we can implement those ways to improve reading comprehension in our classrooms. So we have that resource and then our rooted in reading lesson plans. So for an example, this is one of the comprehension checks that students will be completing weekly. So how this project will work will each week, the rooted in reading, we have a different book that we will focus on. So they have their same book and they have their same strategy. By the end of the week, they should be able to complete this comprehension check on their own. So it has 8 simple questions, just literally asking them about what they read, having them to write their answers out and think a little bit deeper about the story that they just listened to. So over the past 3 or 4 weeks, we have completed these comprehension checks independently, and I've kept track of all of their scores. So here is some of the data that I pulled from their comprehension checks. So I pulled 4 students that continuously performed very low on these comprehension checks. So as you can see, student 1 scored a 25% on the first week's comprehension check. But by the second week, after we had been completing the comprehension checks, the daily higher order thinking questions, and independent comprehension activities on their level, they were able to improve their second week's comprehension check scores. So I have continued to update the bar graph as the weekly scores are added. So even though all 4 of these students did increase their comprehension, there still is work that needs to be done, not only with those 4 students, but whole group as well. So students that repeatedly scored below 70% on their weekly comprehension checks will be moved into an intervention group. So the interventionist will work closely with students to improve their comprehension skills while reading books on their current level. So not only will working with the interventionist improve their comprehension skills, but it should be able to bump their reading levels up to get them back on grade level, which is the main goal of our reading instruction. So the goal of the interventions will be for the students, after reading a book or a short passage, students will use their implied meaning to answer comprehension questions with 80% accuracy. So I have here a resource that we can take a look at. This is a comprehension interview, and these interviews are awesome for tracking data and for tracking their progress with their comprehension skills. So we have some self-monitoring things you can track. Can the student retell what just happened? Can they make any connections to what they read? Were they able to make predictions, visualize, and then can they summarize their short story or passage that they read. So the interventionist will ask these students, not necessarily every single question every time, but as they begin to work and learn a little bit more about what their needs are for improving, the interventionist will be able to fill in the student's response in the empty box here, and then come up to the top and talk about, was it easy for them? Was it instructional? So would they still need help with an adult, or was it way too hard? And so keeping track of these percentages will allow me to see how they are making improvements in their comprehension skills. So these will also be sent to you guys if you feel the need to use them for any of your students. So this is our comprehension interview, and that would be a part of that second string of intervention data that they might need. So not every single student will need to complete the interview necessarily daily or even weekly, but a good goal to have is once a month that each student in the class will be pulled to complete the interview with an appropriate level text. So you're checking for their intervention, and then you're also double checking their current rating level and making sure they're still challenged in their classroom work. So data would be collected and discussed during grade level meetings. So maybe once a month, we could come together and chat about our comprehension interview data. All right, so although I have not collected an extreme amount of data yet, I've already seen small amounts of progress in my students' comprehension. As you noticed, all 4 of my lower level students saw an improvement in their comprehension check scores from week 1 to week 2. However, my goal is for these students to reach a score of 100 multiple weeks in a row by the end of the year. So we want these kids to be scoring at least 100 on these comprehension checks, as they should be getting used to answering those higher order thinking questions. I've also noticed that my students are happy to complete the comprehension activities I've implemented throughout the school day, and I find them to be engaging and helpful when tracking data. So I'm excited to see how the further implementation of both of these plans, how they will grow by the end of the school year. So for our next steps, I will continue implementing the rated and reading lesson plans and continue giving students the weekly comprehension checks as their tier 1 instruction. If needed, I will continue working with students one-on-one or in small group settings to improve their comprehension skills, which would be that tier 2 instruction if needed. And then I will continue working with interventionists as needed. We will continue sharing assessment and intervention data with each other. And I also found a helpful resource that can help us just in our whole group literacy instruction with some tips on guided reading. So this website is kind of like a blog, so it's updated, however often, with some really awesome tips about how we can improve our small group reading instruction. So that will be sent out to you guys as well. So do you guys have any questions? Anything? If not, that's all I have.